So we have brought the infographic that has been shared with the members that just shows revenue and expenditure for the first quarter, and that will be also part and parcel of the material that we have. So since the chair has mentioned that the report was actually read, we undertook this analysis earlier this year, and we must make a disclaimer that if figures have changed from what is pertaining now, it's because Minister of Finance released other sets of figures in April after we had already submitted this analysis. But by and large, the figures that we have in that analysis are the figures that were pertaining as of end of March, which was what we were guided. So I'll just be quickly guiding the team on the pages and just picking out key components. So of course, our analysis begins with a global outlook and the national outlook. And I think predominantly what we picked from the first pages is that predominantly this year, because of COVID, as well as the trade tensions in the Middle East, growth has already been projected to be low globally in the continent as well as in Zambia. And I think that is where we're coming from, even as we were implementing the 2020 national budget. It was at the backbone of what is pertaining in the global economy. And when we come to Zambia, of course, the IMF has already predicted that Zambian economy will maybe grow even by the negatives because of COVID among them, as well as other fundamentals that might not be positive, which we will talk about in the analysis. And also the key messages that we have is that the economic adjustments due to COVID will result in a drop in revenue for the country. And also the projected revenue for 2020 national budget is likely to be short by 14.8 billion, or 19% of the budget. And this was mentioned by the Ministry of Finance. And then going into page 4, what we have is just graphs that basically show us inflation as well, which has continued to be high. And in the period under review, January to March 2020, inflation has been rising. So the first graph on page 4 shows a comparison from December 2018 to January 2020, and you can see the trend has continuously been actually going high in terms of inflation. And then the diagram below shows growth that we talked about, that the trend of growth as well has continued to show a downward trend. And for 2019-2020, it was supposed to be actually growing, but that red line has actually continued to go down in view of COVID. So probably when we do the second quarter, we'll see that this red line will probably continue to go down even below the negatives because of the effect of COVID, among others. Then going into page 5, foreign exchange markets has been affected as well. Our currency has been subdued. Of course, COVID as well is one of the causes, but also there's been increased demand for importation of farming inputs, petroleum, and electricity, among others. And also international reserves have continued to go down. So in a nutshell, what we see with the fundamentals, most of them are not showing a positive trend. The currency, international reserves, growth, inflation, they are all not showing a positive picture. And that's where we're coming from. And that's the challenge that is before us as a country. Then when you go to page 5, there's a table that just compares 2019 and 2020 national budget. So it shows which allocations have increased or reduced if we compare the two budgets, because in the letter we were also asked to compare 2019 and 2020. And you can see that what we picked that has reduced is environmental protection. In 2019, it was 875 million allocated to the budget. In 2020, it was 611 million. So that as well is a challenge to our fight on environmental protection. So having said that, we go straight into the budget. That is on page 6. The table that we have compares the MTEF and the 2020 national budget. So we want to see how much the projections that were there in the MTEF have been placed in the budget. And we see that there are discrepancies as well on many entries, which I'll not go into detail. We hope that the members looked at the figures and can discuss them later. And then after this, we'll go straight into page 8, Chair of the Commission, where we can now discuss the actual comparison. So we can go to page 8. So we're comparing the 2019 and the 2020 budget, quarter 1, and we're focusing on revenue. So that's the table on page 8. So what we see as a trend is in terms of revenue, I think for both 2019 and 2020, for the first quarter, the country was able to actually acquire the revenue that was targeted. But the target was met for both 2019 and 2020, and we also put details of how they managed to actually get these revenues. Then income tax for 2019, it was below target. For 2020, it was above target at 5.8 billion. And this was driven by company tax, mainly on accounts of payments made by the mining companies and positive performance, of which we are in a huge shortfall. And the census needs to be conducted in August. So as it stands, the donors have only put in so much. That means that the budget might still be touched to fund the census, because that is one of the highest priorities that we're having as a nation this year. So we suspect that with the census coming up and other debt repayments needed to be paid, we will have funds being redirected from the budget, and that calls for a re-strategizing of the budget over, and that is one of our recommendations. And what we have from page 11 going all the way down is just keys of where the funds went to. I think we won't mention that, but for the reference of the House. Then also from page 12, we also talk about the realities of COVID, which is what I have mentioned, where the funds have been established for 57 million, 659 million, and then the contingency plan with disaster management. We've had a 2.5 billion released for domestic suppliers, and we've also had a 10 billion facility released by the Bank of Zambia to help cushion with SMEs as well. So we can see how monies have actually moved. Also, what was projected and budgeted in the budget and also actually released was different as well. That remains a challenge, poor release of funds. Then the debt problem remains a very huge issue as well.
And I think last time during the budget speech, it must have been pegged at 1.4. So I don't know, have we improved in terms of import cover in view of...
What was put in as entries was okay, because we were told the money is going to revamp Zambia Railways, ZESCO, and all the institutions that needed to be revamped. That on paper was okay. But when the money came from the Eurobond and how it has been used, we see challenges in the Auditor General's report. We see that some of those funds did not actually go to what was intended. That is where we get concerned. Because if what has been put on paper is not what is actually occurring with those funds, then we are concerned. And that is only for the Eurobond, because we were told that these funds will go towards these institutions. But as of now, we've not seen a major revamp in the railways or in ZESCO or other areas. Then for other forms of debt, we have also borrowed for infrastructure, which is quite a challenge, because for roads, for us to see the benefits, it takes 4 or 5 years. So if we've borrowed and we have to pay back, we're not getting returns as we're supposed to get. So in short, we should really prioritize what we can borrow for. Then to answer the question on the experts, in the first place, debt was not supposed to have been allowed to escalate to such levels where it's now become unsustainable. As it stands, we have tried to raise our concern over the bringing in of experts, and if the Zambian experts cannot do that. And what we have been told is that these experts who are coming in are the ones who have links to the international partners who have given us these monies. The links that our local economists do not have to talk to those institutions in America, in Europe, who they actually deal with. So these people, what they will do is basically go and talk to their partners and speak for our part as a country. And what I also suspect is that they will still come and work with the same local economists in Zambia, and that brings again the challenge of why can just the Zambians do this? Why can the team from Ministry of Finance, Bank of Zambia, be sent to go and renegotiate? And that is what we are currently doing as we speak now. So because the information has been very limited on this aspect, but that is as far as we have for now, and we don't want to mislead the House, but that is just as far as we have information.